Who is the most underrated actor of all time?
It's Dolph Lundgren.
Correct. Why?
Well, because of his spiky hair and his ice-cold demeanor and his big muscles.
Absolutely.
I must break you. The guilty will be punished.
My name is Sergeant Andrew Scott.
Come on, guys, don't do this. If I don't get breakfast, I get real grumpy. I don't think you like me grumpy.
And you go in pieces, asshole.
Let's kick some ass.
Hello and welcome back to I Must Break This Podcast, the fan podcast taking an in-depth look at the filmography of Dolph Lundgren. Today we're jumping back into the Universal Soldier franchise and looking at the 2012 surrealist nightmare, Universal Soldier: Day of Reckoning. In this wild continuation of the Universal Soldier saga, martial arts sensation Scott Adkins joins the fold as John, a lost soul who's after the man who murdered his wife and daughter, Jean-Claude Van Damme's Luke Devereaux. Yet as John digs deeper for the truth, he discovers that not everything is as it seems, and that he's up against not just an army of upgraded soldiers, but another clone of Dolph Lundgren's Andrew Scott, who also has his own sinister agenda.
Daddy, there's monsters in the house.
What the hell? No! Run!
Created in a laboratory. Programmed to kill.
Unnoticed we live among them like ghosts. Waiting for the moment when our oppressors shall be forced to kneel before us! The day of reckoning!
Betrayed, they seek freedom. Led by the undisputed Universal Soldier.
We're brothers. We're one.
But one man, haunted by grief.
You don't remember anything, do you?
I had a family.
Consumed by vengeance.
You tell me who he is.
If you go looking for Devereaux, he'll find you first.
Unleashes the soul of a warrior.
Put the plumber to work.
Get down!
Jean-Claude Van Damme. Scott Adkins. With Dolph Lundgren. In the ultimate battle.
Hello, soldier.
To the end. Universal Soldier: Day of Reckoning.
There is no end.
I'm your host, Sean Malloy, and joining me to chat this film today is Ben Hyton and Alex Balerdi from the Arniethology Presents podcast. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us, Sean.
Yeah, it's great, Sean. I've been excited about this for a while now. Thank you.
Well, I've been excited about this as well. I mean, technically, I'm jumping a few years ahead in the filmography of Lundgren because, you know, kind of like your show, I like to go in chronological order, really examining the actor's career. However, the most recent episode, we looked at Regeneration, which was also directed by John Hyams. And when I got in contact with you guys a few months back, you guys said this was the one that you really wanted to chat about. So it really only made sense. That's kind of why I expedited the conversation, to be honest, because not only did I really want to talk with you guys, but I figured since the last episode was Regeneration, it kind of made sense to make the next one Day of Reckoning.
Yeah, it worked out great for us because we didn't really want to wait much longer. I think the reason that we both went for this one is, bizarrely, just after it came out, I think Alex and I, we live in different cities, but we watched it at the same time.
Yeah, we did.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're both fans of all of those 80s, 90s action heroes, Dolph, Jean-Claude, even Steven Seagal to an extent. So I think, we've talked over the years about Arnie, obviously, which is how our podcast started. And I think we both have love for the original Universal Soldier movie. And I'd seen Regeneration. I thought it was quite good. And then I saw Day of Reckoning, and it's a completely different beast. It's unlike any other film in the franchise, I think. So that's why I'm really excited to talk about this one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I almost didn't believe it when, we were given the invitation and everything, because when Ben recommended this film to me when it came out, he said, like so many of Ben's recommendations to me are just like, you have to watch this. Like, just don't ask me anything, watch this. And I tend to trust him, and there's a few over the years where he's done that with. But for it just, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but this film feels so much sort of on brand, if we have a brand. I mean, our brand is following certain actors across, their careers, much like yourself, Sean. And to have a film like this where our sort of 80s action hero stars are being put into the kind of all the new stuff that has been developed. And if you want the Universal Soldier franchise is, for me, the whole thing, even the shitty films, they feel like a kind of like a sketch of how action films have changed over the years and what we've come to expect from them. And for me, Day of Reckoning is the pinnacle, the merging of, sort of the martial arts films that we see, from the East and then and West merging into this kind of high production quality, action, fiesta. I don't know what to say. It's crazy. It's such an insane film.
Well, what's really interesting about it is, I agree with everything that you guys said. I will say the original Universal Soldier film is such a classic, and I'm not going to repeat myself because I've, echoed this on previous episodes, but the original Universal Soldier film is really, symbolic of that early 90s period. And there's so much about it that is just so amazing. I mean, number one, it took two action stars in their prime and pitted them against one another. I can't think of too many other films that did that. With regard to this particular film, Day of Reckoning, it's really interesting because when you hear about it, I think, people either really love it or they hate it. And what's really fascinating about it is it almost seems like the film is purposely trying to alienate fans of the original.
Yes.
Because it is so completely different from the original. And I will admit, I mean, I'm not going to get to my recommendation, right now, but I will admit when I first saw this film, I was turned off and I really didn't like it because it was, such a different taste and such a different animal than the first Universal Soldier. Regeneration, if you take a look at Regeneration, Regeneration is certainly, much more brutal than the first one. However, it's still kind of, it's still in the same wheelhouse, if you will. You know what I mean? It's still a proper sequel. This film is just completely, on another level, completely out of left field. I mean, it is out there.
Yeah, I think this film, if you haven't seen Regeneration, you wouldn't recognize this as a Universal Soldier movie at all. It bears no resemblance to the original movie. I think if you watch them as a trilogy, like the first one, Regeneration and Day of Reckoning, I guess it kind of makes sense, but I do think, I don't know anything about John Hyams in particular, but I do think he was sort of tearing up the rule book and saying, you know what, I just want to make the movie I want to make. And if it means that I've got some brand recognition by tying it to Unisol, so be it. But actually, this is just the film I want to make.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and actually, before we really get rolling, I have to ask you guys, because I've listened to quite a few episodes of your podcast. Tell us real quick about the Arniethology, because, I mean, you guys essentially do kind of what I've been doing, and you guys each season, you guys pick a new actor and you guys go through that actor's entire filmography, film by film. So if I'm correct, season 1, you guys focused on Arnold Schwarzenegger. Season 2 was Tom Cruise, and currently you're at Keanu Reeves. Is that right?
Yeah,
that's exactly right. Yeah.
So I guess my number one question there is, I mean, what has inspired you to pick certain actors for each of these seasons?
Is there
inspiration? It's too strong a word. Yeah. I mean, the Arnie, the way it started was Alex and I went to university together, and when he invited me around to his flat for the first time, he had 3 DVDs on his shelf. One was David Blaine's Showman, which we all had that DVD, right?
Yeah.
The other was Denzel Washington, Russell Crowe masterpiece, Virtuosity.
Amazing.
And then there was Terminator 2 in this beautiful Steelbook limited edition release. So we got talking about them. It turned out we were both big Arnie fans. Alex showed me a picture of him in his teen years in a, what do you call it, like a unitard?
Yeah. I was rowing at the time, so I was like just working out. I was pretty ripped, but yeah. It is just a rowing lycra, that's what it is, yeah.
Oh, right, okay. But you were doing the classic Arnie, bodybuilder pose.
Yeah.
And so, fast forward like 15 years, and I had been involved in another podcast project that had come to an end. I fancied doing something again, and I just put it to Alex. I said, let's go right back to the beginning, do all of his films in order. And then once we'd done that, that took about a year or more, to sort of get up to speed doing them in chronological order. We had a good time. We had a fan base. We wanted to keep going. And Tom Cruise just came out of nowhere. We kind of wanted to do Sigourney Weaver, and then we realized, well, actually, Tom Cruise is got a really, really good body of work. And that was brilliant. I really, really enjoyed that. And it gave me a different kind of appreciation for Tom Cruise. When we came to settling on Keanu, I think it was really just last year he was having a real cultural moment. With the anticipation for Cyberpunk, the game that's coming out, and just lots of memes around him and it coming out that he's just a wholesome, good dude. And it just felt like it was the right person to maybe do something a bit more popular, maybe less niche than what we've done before. And of all of the guys that we've looked at, Keanu's the person whose films we actually know the least. We only really know the big hitters, and it's been really interesting finding all of these small indie films that he's worked on over the years. But that leads me to a question, Sean, because the natural crossover for our 2 projects is obviously Johnny Mnemonic, because that would be Keanu and Dolph Lundgren in the same movie. But when you contacted us about possibly doing a crossover, you didn't mention Johnny Mnemonic, I don't think. You mentioned Street Kings.
Yes. And look, and I know you floated out there on your show, but I will say it again. If you guys are willing and you guys would like a third voice on Street Kings, I would love to join you guys. So, but yeah, Street Kings is actually one of my favorite Keanu roles. And I voiced it in an email to you guys, but I'll kind of echo it again. It's really interesting. I think Keanu Reeves has had a fascinating career as well.
Yeah.
And if you really think about this, and maybe most of the credit should go to his agent, I don't know. But if you really think about it, we can really chart Keanu Reeves as being the action star or actor, if you just want to call it an actor. But we can chart him as being the one who has really reset the action genre 3 times. Because if you really think about it, okay, when he did Speed back in 1994, 95 or whatever, that was the film that kind of showed audiences that the action heroes did not need to be the big, muscly guys like Arnold and Sly. And so when Speed pretty much set the action genre in a new direction. And suddenly guys like Arnold and Sly were kind of reeling from that a bit. And then if you jump down a few years down the line, if you look at The Matrix, when The Matrix came out, I actually watched that one again just a couple days ago. Matrix completely broke the rules. And so if you look at the action genre there, you suddenly had a lot of, what did they call it? Wire foo. You know what I mean? You suddenly had a lot of wire work, and a lot of action movies were kind of using that bullet time aspect. And then if you jump down a few more years down the line, you go to John Wick, And once again, Keanu Reeves reset the action genre, because what do we have now? We have action movies are kind of trying to ape the style that we saw in John Wick. You know what I mean? And so it's really amazing. I guess we can say thank you, Mr. Reeves, for continually putting the genre into a new format.
I think, absolutely. Thanks, Keanu. If you're listening, we love you. Get in touch at the Arniethology.
Yeah,
but,
of course.
He's just, for me, he's the perennial comeback kid. He's been, underestimated since day one. And whenever his career seems to be at its lowest ebb, he seems to come back with one of his biggest hits. And those films that you've mentioned are exactly it. He became an action hero with Speed. He wasn't up to that point. He'd only done Point Break in the action genre before that. He absolutely lifted himself up from what was becoming a career rut, or indecision at least, in the end of the 90s with The Matrix, which completely revived his career. And again, sort of hit the doldrums again around the end of the 2010s. And just blew everyone away with John Wick again. And maybe you're right. Maybe he has just got the best agent in the world, but it's something that we're continuing to chart. And by the end of the Keanu Copia, hopefully we'll have some sort of thesis about the genius of Keanu.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I've learned doing this season with Keanu. I think we sort of stumbled upon it. I think it's Ben's credit for picking it out, is that we thought that Keanu was, an A-list action star who had like lulls in his career where he would do independent movies. But having seen some of these other films that just weren't even on my radar, we realized that through discussion is that he actually he prefers doing those independent films. Like, it seems to be what he wants to do, and that he does the bigger films either just because, or for a paycheck or whatever other reason, or he is attracted to the projects genuinely. But it's very strange for me to see it the other way around, because that's not the Keanu I knew. And I always made the assumption that he would do these other films because he wasn't getting the bigger roles, or his career was in a lull in some way. I sort of saw him a bit like a John Travolta, lull in his career until Pulp Fiction came along. But that's not the case at all with Keanu. He just seems to be consistently working. And yeah, he's done some films that we're saying are 1 or 2 stars, but I'm really excited to get into some of the other movies that I would not have wanted to watch otherwise. And I think that's the thing that's propelled me throughout our podcast is, first of all, Ben's invitation and insistence, as a friend and fellow podcaster, say, hey, stretch your horizons, watch these films, even if they're in genres that you don't like. And following one particular actor forces you to do that. And I'm wondering if you found the same thing with Dolph. I don't know nearly as much about his career as, of course, you must do, but he's not necessarily an actor that I would have decided to follow, albeit for some of the action films that I know he's in. But that was a large part of our thinking, was around, like, we thought about Meryl Streep. We have people constantly telling us to do Tom Hanks or Sigourney Weaver. And then, we have these other ideas, but we look at their body of work and we say, is it going to be interesting? And, I mentioned Meryl Streep. We just say, well, we don't want to do that, because every single episode's going to be, yep, Meryl Streep's great. Well done.
Yeah, she's brilliant. She was nominated for an Oscar. Well done, Meryl. Yeah. Next week,
Tom
same
Hanks,
thing.
Same. That's the same problem with Tom Hanks. And so it's like, we wanted to pick people who had bodies of work that are interesting. And I'm interested. I would also like to know, if you're willing to share, Sean, what your process was in terms of picking Dolph.
Yeah, well, everything you guys said, I really appreciate. And yeah, I know. And real quick, before I forget, might I suggest for season 4, you guys consider the great Kurt Russell.
You are
body of work.
You're absolutely not the first person to mention Kurt Russell. I think he's probably the person most people have suggested.
And he's certainly in the running, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, he big in the 80s, which is important for us because we had to grow up watching his films. He's done action movie stuff, absolutely. Iconic action stuff, definitely. Yeah. He's done lots of different genres, and he's still working today. And he's still pretty good. I like Kurt Russell a lot. I think it's a good call.
He's so cool. He's so cool. And it kind of like with, going back to what you guys said about Street Kings, I think the reason why I've gravitated to Street Kings and also why I gravitate to someone like Kurt Russell is in Street Kings in particular, Keanu is just so cool. I mean, he is so badass. I've used this analogy before.
Right.
On the show Seinfeld, there was the episode where George had a man crush on Tony, who was Elaine's boyfriend. Yeah. And that's kind of how I feel when I watch Street Kings. I just, when and I feel silly admitting this, but
it's great.
When Keanu was on screen in Street Kings, and he is wearing, I'll never forget this, but when he is wearing that Pantera shirt, and he's wearing all these rings and everything, he just looks so cool that I feel like George Costanza, where I'm like, dude, can I hang out with you?
Yeah.
Like, can I?
I feel pretty much like that about every Keanu film, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's listening to our latest season Ben is crushing hard on Keanu, like, all the time. And not even just Keanu, just his hair. Really his hair more than anything.
I have a hair envy. Yeah, it's something that comes with middle age.
Yeah.
The man doesn't age either. I mean, can we just say that as well? Like,
that's a thing, isn't it? Isn't there there's a whole website like Immortal Keanu or something like that, isn't there? About tracking how there's like pictures of these old pictures of Keanu, like oldie pictures of people that look exactly like Keanu. Have you seen this? Have you come across this?
Oh,
Sean?
like he's a time traveler. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen that, Sean?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Bits of it. Yeah. No, it's amazing. But to answer your question about Dolph, he's been. I mean, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. He has been my favorite since I was a real little kid. And so when I decided to get into podcasting, I saw that there was a bit of a niche, that there were movie retrospective review podcasts out there, obviously, but there was not one dedicated to Dolph. And I feel like, when you are on this journey and you are going through an actor's entire filmography, I mean, and I've seen these films already before, but when you are going in succession and watching every one of these films in order, kind of like with you guys, I imagine, you not only do you appreciate the actor and their career and their decisions in this order, but you kind of start to understand things, and why they chose certain roles, when you go in order, especially as you look back upon it nowadays. I mean, for example, I imagine when you guys did Kindergarten Cop, when I first saw Kindergarten Cop, it was a, cute little, you could say family film, but it's actually kind of oddly violent in some parts. But when you watch it, it's just, this is Arnold. He's a big teddy bear. But what's fascinating about Kindergarten Cop is, correct me if I'm wrong, I probably should go back through this, but that was one of his first attempts at comedy. And then I believe he followed that up with either Total Recall or Terminator 2, if I'm not mistaken. So he went from
I think it's either side. He did Twins, which was obviously it was such a huge hit, Twins. That was his big entry into comedy. And then, you're right, Total Recall, Kindergarten Cop, T2. I mean, it's just a really weird spread of things there.
But you understand, like, okay, this is why he chose to do this film at that moment in time. He wanted to kind of tap into, another market, but he also wanted to dip back into the market that he knew and that he understood and that he knew was going to sell. And so I think with any actor, kind of when you go on these journeys, like I said, you understand it and you appreciate it more. I mean, I'll admit right now, I am really not looking forward to covering Dolph Lundgren when he did Kindergarten Cop 2. I'm not looking forward to it. However, going in this order, I can understand why he did that, because when he did Kindergarten Cop 2, let's see, that came out in 2016, 2017. He was on a bit of a comeback, and while that was a direct-to-video film, I think around that time he wanted to kind of strike while the iron was hot, and so that came in a period in his career where he was just signing on for tons of these small little direct-to-video projects, but that one in particular had a fairly big marketing push, and for a direct-to-video release, that one was pretty big. And so I think, like I said, when you go back through and you watch these films, especially in hindsight, when you watch them today, they always say hindsight is 20/20. So you get I guess you get a greater understanding is what I'm trying to say, is why they picked on certain roles.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Sean. Like, there's an interesting thing I think might seem like a bit of a jump, but I feel like it's a good segue before we get into talking about the movie as well, is, I've always thought of like, there's one or two, maybe three tiers of action stars. And, we have the sort of the Planet Hollywood group. You have Arnie, Sly, and Bruce Willis, that you might say at the time of 80s, 90s action, they're the pinnacle. But then you get your, JCVDs, you get your Dolphs, you get your Chuck Norris, you get people like that who, they are doing a lot of direct-to-video stuff, but kind of nipping at the heels, if you want, of these A-listers. And case in point, there's a nice, neat little story. And like you, Sean, I love the original Universal Soldier. Like, for me, it is the one of, if not the quintessential action films of the time. It's got everything in it for me. It's got action. It's got that cheese, that kind of a bit of melodrama as well. And it doesn't dip into that kind of thing that it descended into with the subsequent films that came out in, like, I think the same year. I think there was 2 sequels made in 98, with Matt Battaglia. Is that his name?
Yeah. And the Canadian made for TV sequels.
Yeah. So. Awful. I don't think it pays to even talk about it, but maybe offline, I've got there's just funny things to comment on. And I watched all of them just in preparation for this, just to see if there was anything that stuck in the Unisol universe, anything that was canon. But really, nothing in the John Hyams films, nothing really does stick other than from what the original is. And there aren't really any characters that cross over at all. But I think it does pay to watch the original and then these two. And the return is just, in many ways, the return is worse. Yeah, because the Matt Battaglia films, you can just enjoy them as like, some weird X-Files episode or something. That's even though the X-Files was great in its own way, it had some pretty awful episodes. But it has the same production values as those very early X-Files episodes. It is made for TV, like you said. There's a story about Arnie visiting the Universal Soldier set and, to visit Jean-Claude and to have a tour of the set. And this private plane arrives, where they're filming, and it's Tom Cruise's jet. It's Tom Cruise's private plane. And the story goes that, everyone knows this is Tom Cruise's plane arriving, and Arnie comes off the plane. And the reason why it's Arnie's because Arnie's private jet was in the shop. It was getting repaired. Sure. So Tom Cruise lent him, so you can borrow mine. It's just like borrowing my car. It's insane. And the theory goes, or the fan theory that I was reading anyway, the guy who's writing the article, he was saying it seemed as though Arnie was checking out the competition, because not only just Jean-Claude is visiting, it's Dolph is there too. And it seemed as though Arnie was, it's the kind of, if you watch some of the interviews that he gives, especially, on the Predator, making of, you see how competitive Arnie was and how he was looking out for the people that were his competitors, but also there was a camaraderie there. Apparently they went back to Jean-Claude's trailer after a tour and they ate chicken and pasta. but
I think
it's a weird story.
But that's really interesting because if I think about, so bizarrely, my best friend when I was about 10 years old was also called Alex, different Alex, but we were big into Arnie films, and we're fortunate enough that our parents let us watch all of the 18 certificate.
Is this the only reason you asked me to come on, the podcast?
It's a big reason. I'm not going to lie.
I just remind you, you just said, Alex likes Arnie films.
Yeah, I get to relive my youth a little bit, yeah.
Great, thanks, man.
But, you're watching Predator, Commando, all Red Heat, Raw Deal, all of them. And you want more of that. And there's only so many Arnie films. So you start looking at the other films that are on the same shelf in the video store. Yeah. That's how you find, AWOL or Kickboxer. Joshua Tree, right?
Punisher.
So that's how Punisher, right. So that's how we got into the Jean-Claude Van Dammes, the Steven Seagals, Mark Dacascos, Dolph Lundgren. Okay. So then when Universal Soldier comes out, it was for us like when Heat came out,
Yeah.
Like these two are together for the first time and they're rivals. Like this is going to be a film of these two kicking the shit out of each other. And that was so exciting. And that first film, okay, it's corny, it's cheesy, it's very 90s or whatever. It's so much fun. I mean, it was extraordinarily violent at the time, really. It's a very gory film in a lot of ways, but it's gory with all of the fun of that 90s, action genre. And Dolph Lundgren, I have to say, is still absolutely amazing in that film.
His scene, stunning. Yeah.
His scene in the grocery store when he's ranting.
Oh my God.
See, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
That bit. Yeah. I love that scene so much. And some of the faces he pulls in the final fight as well are great.
Oh my God. When he throws the grenade and he gets Veronica, he does this kind of fist bump to the air. Yeah. It's insane. It should be a meme if it isn't. It should be like some GIF. Like, it's insane. He's just like, yeah! Like, he's so happy that he got it. And, it's insane.
Well, and the grocery store scene, and in the grocery store scene, you said it right, Ben, but you have to remember he does a pause. Because he goes, see? Yeah. And then there's a pause. Yeah. He kind of holds up his arms. He's all, see? They're everywhere.
Right.
And the pause is the best Sean, thing about that scene.
Sorry to jump ahead, Sean, and to jump in, but that's the thing that I enjoyed, particularly with his performance in Regeneration. Like, I was waiting for that scene. You talked about it on the episode that you did with David Ullman. Is that how you say his name?
Yes.
It was, you both pointed it out, and I want to reiterate it. I'm waiting for this moment. I'm waiting for this scene because I've seen the original Universal Soldier thing with the ears in Vietnam, and he's talking into the ears like, "Can you hear me?" It's like there are these cheesy quips that are in it, and I do think that Regeneration is a Universal Soldier film. I don't think it's too much of a departure. I think it's midway in between the original and Day of Reckoning. But if you look at the original Day of Reckoning, they're very different films. But I think that Regeneration sits in the middle. It bridges the gap between them, and it bridges the gap between the transition that you see the Luke Devereaux character taking, that he's going through this evolution. That it does make sense with the films in sequence. You see how he turns into this kind of Universal Soldier god in the end. But for him to go from the character he is when Dolph is, about to kill these villagers in Vietnam to becoming the same basically as the Dolph character and becoming Dolph's, alpha, if you want. It kind of, to me, it's like Dolph was always the Universal Soldier, if that makes sense. And he's always the psychotic one. And that's the thread that I see going throughout the whole thing, is that there's something in Andrew Scott's genes that make him, that he's always going to be this way. There's like a genetic memory that he's always going to be this psychotic killer.
He's a psychopath, and that's the difference. Luke Devereaux has humanity, and it's that drives their rivalry throughout. And that is what's so interesting about Jean-Claude's character in Day of Reckoning, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, and I was just going to say, this particular film, I mean, I remember when I first heard about this, and I was kind of in a bit of a disbelief that it was actually going to happen.
Right.
But what's interesting is I remember I was, following the production, and when you see, I mean, early on, before I even saw the film, when I saw the various production stills that were being shopped around, showing what the characters looked like in costume, it was almost a shock here. And you could tell, like, okay, John Hyams, he's going for something different here, because Jean-Claude Van Damme, he is, this is not the same Luke Devereaux this go around. I mean, and I remember when I saw some of these early photos, Jean-Claude has a completely shaved head.
Yeah.
He's completely bald. And the leads in these promotional, production photos, the leads, so Dolph and Jean-Claude and Scott Adkins, they're all posing with machetes. I'll never forget this, but they all are holding machetes. Right. And I'm thinking, at the time, I was like, okay, this is a different animal. This is going to have a different taste. And if you look at this one compared to Universal Soldier Regeneration. As if Universal Soldier Regeneration wasn't brutal enough, this one completely goes off the rails in terms of its violence and brutality.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's no holding back. No holding
and
back.
That's the big tonal difference between the original Universal Soldier and this one is, as violent as Universal Soldier is, it is predominantly fun. It's entertainment along with the violence. I don't think the violence in Day of Reckoning is supposed to be fun. I think it is supposed to be ugly and upsetting and forcing you to almost look away.
It's how we empathize with John character, Scott Adkins character.
Well, it's very, very acerbic. It's very unsettling. I mean, and if you think about it, whereas Regeneration was a hybrid of action and horror, this one is most definitely leaning more into its horror. Because this film is almost more of a horror film than an action movie. I mean, every time a gun is fired in this movie, the camera rarely shies away from its impact. I mean, every headshot
just when the kid's getting shot, that's it.
Yeah, and as a father now myself, I'll admit the opening scene it's rough.
I couldn't watch it.
I mean, and from that opening scene,
Sean, I had to fast forward. I saw it when it came out, but I don't know whether it's older age and, having children around in my life, I just couldn't. I just went straight. I knew what was happening, and I said to myself, I don't have to see this. And I fast forward.
But what a statement of intent, like right off the bat. I feel almost sorry for the poor sap who went looking for a cheesy action film and thought, I'll give Day of Reckoning a go. Because, I mean,
again, he's trying to alienate. I think he's trying to alienate fans of the original.
I wouldn't have said that, but decision. You guys are right. I wouldn't have thought that's the case, but in a similar way that, like, I don't know if this is a really weird, like, sidetrack, but it felt like that way with Rick and Morty. Like, it seemed like Justin Roiland, like, even in the, like, third season, they were already doing episodes that were like, oh yeah, you want something funny, let's do something. And they just came out with Pickle Rick, and it was like a fuck you to, like, we're not going to do what you think you want us to do. We're going to do what we find fun and interesting. Ended up being fun and interesting. I don't think that's the goal here. I think John Hyams has taken the concept and said, what would it actually be? Like, if this was real, if the government was in control of this program and lost control of this program, what would happen? And he nailed it. I think he fucking nailed it.
The script actually isn't necessarily that interesting. It's a pretty standard revenge plot, really, from Scott Adkins' point of view. But from that opening scene onwards, what John Hyams does with it is he actually manages to give it a certain amount of emotional resonance, because he's really using a lot of different tricks to try and immerse you in what Scott Adkins is going through. And I'm never going to say that Scott Adkins is going to win an Oscar for Best Actor or anything. I like him, but I think John Hyams is doing a lot of work for him in this instance. You've got the POV sequence right at the beginning, complete with artificial blinks as part of the cinematography.
Oh, yeah.
And then, pushing you up to that point of, surely they're not going to kill the kid. Yep, the kid is the first to go. And then,
it's not actually.
Actually, the hardest thing to watch in the whole film is the stroboscopic sequences.
Oh my God, there should be a warning. Yeah. There should be an epilepsy warning or something at the beginning of this. There isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and let's just say right now, I mean, the fact that that John Hyams made this film the way, the reason why I think this film looks and feels and is the way it is because I feel like John Hyams had the pull to make the film that he wanted. And I think the reason for that is because Regeneration was success. So,
really? Well, I didn't realize it was, yeah.
Well, and I mean, I'm going to kind of go back to what I said with Regeneration, but in Regeneration, I feel like John Hyams was the real star in that movie, because regardless of the violence and themes throw fans off, there's no denying that John Hyams has his own aesthetic and style, which is loud, proud, and on display here. And so, I mean, the story goes, John Hyams took over the Universal Soldier franchise in 2009 with the sequel, Regeneration. That film turned out to be a modest success in terms of a direct-to-video action film. And so Hyams was brought back on board to helm the next installment. And what he did, which, as we keep saying, was a risky gamble, but also slightly ingenious, is he took this in a completely different direction. Because Hyams now had the weight and pull to do this. And, look, we've seen this happen all the time in Hollywood. When a director takes a franchise or noted property and he turns it into a success for the studio, well, then that director is given more creative control with their next film.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the example I always love to cite is, look, for example, at the original 1989 Batman compared to 1992's Batman Returns. Batman Returns is so much more of a Tim Burton film than the first one. And I think a lot of that is because Warner Brothers backed off a bit and they said, okay, you've shown us what you can do. It was a success. Make the film you want to. And I feel like that is exactly what Hyams is doing here. No way would Hyams have been able to go this route with Regeneration.
Yeah.
But because Regeneration was a success that it was, Hyams said, okay, I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to add a Lynchian element and a David Lynchian vibe to this entire franchise.
Do you think that's because do you think he knew he wasn't going to get another one? Like, because there hasn't been one.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think John Hyams has been able to cash in those chips for anything much in the years since, has he? Have you seen any of his subsequent films? Because I checked a few out on IMDb and they don't have very good reviews.
He did a dramedy. It's a sports dramedy called All Square that is actually a charming little movie, but it's not an action movie, obviously, at all. It's very, it's a very straightforward, simple little independent drama comedy kind of thing. He did another one that's out right now called Alone, about a woman being hunted in the woods by a stalker of serial killers.
That sounds like more like his film, though. The other one sounds like a paycheck. Yeah. This one sounds like his film.
The guy is talented, and it's very clear when he is shooting a film that he has his own style, and like I said earlier, that he has his own aesthetic, which he loves to display. He did another one with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
That was the one I was interested in, but it sounds terrible.
It's not good. It's not good, to be perfectly honest. And Jean-Claude he's barely on screen. I think Jean-Claude at about 2008, 2009 kind of started saying, this Hollywood thing is, I'm going to be semi-retired. Because if you look at all of his films, he takes on these supporting roles and he doesn't speak a heck of a lot. You almost sense that he doesn't even want to be there.
It's such a shame because all of this stuff happened just after the JCVD movie, which Alex and I have talked about. His performance in that is remarkable. God. Like
I love that.
So
film.
Good in that. And then he did these couple of Universal Soldier films. Like, good, okay, this is cool. You're doing interesting stuff. And then, it just seems to have evaporated. Although I understand Jean-Claude Van Johnson, the show he did on Prime, is supposed to be quite good.
It was okay. I think a lot of people loved it, and there are some things about it that are fun. I personally was not as enamored as some with it because I wanted a little bit more out of it, to be perfectly honest. I don't think 6 episodes, I think it was 6 episodes, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think that was nearly enough. And I feel like the 30-minute runtime of each episode was not enough to really, to have fun with the concept. But I think it was a valiant effort, and he definitely has fun with his with poking fun at his career and his image over the years. But with regard to his direct-to-video output in these films, if you look at his look at the end of Day of Reckoning, which we're going to be getting to, it is out there, it is bizarre. But even though he has this wild look, he doesn't speak really at all in this film. And so you have to wonder, it's kind of like, Jean-Claude, do you even want to be here anymore? Do you even want to be doing this anymore? Like, what is going on?
Yeah, it's weird. I think it might be, I think, so you said a bit about this on your previous episode, Sean, which I really enjoyed it, by the way. Just like, I thought it was a really good analysis of the Unisol franchise as well. And you and David pulled out some points, especially that there's the thing about there being no real protagonist at all in Regeneration, and it's the exact opposite in Day of Reckoning. There's only really the protagonist, and that makes Jean-Claude's part in it, the way he plays it, make much more sense. He is this kind. He's a ghost, and the character in Day of Reckoning makes sense. He's a ghost. And so while we might be disappointed in not seeing more of Jean-Claude, it fits with whatever contractual obligations he had or whatever he was saying he wanted to do. Like you guys pointed out, his, 15 days of filming or whatever he had contracted. And it was sad for me to hear that, because I'm not saying I disagree with the analysis. It's probably true. I don't know nearly enough about how these things play out to know what's really happening. But it suddenly made sense of why he was doing so little on screen. And I don't know how much of that was because Jean-Claude started to phone it in his career at the moment, and he's just again taking a paycheck, or it's John Hyams saying, no, I want you to play it this way. I want you to basically not be there.
Well, I think part of it is also
it's the character demands that.
Obviously, as he's got older, I think he's in his 60s now. But even on this film in 2012, he was really struggling with the action choreography, I think.
You can see it's not him in some bits, can't you?
Because Scott Adkins is half his age.
It's ridiculous.
He just couldn't keep up with him.
And they're doing that thing where they speed up his punches. I don't know what it's called. There's a name for it, isn't there?
Speed punching?
Speed punching. Yeah. Speed punching. No.
But I can't help but wonder why, whereas, Jean-Claude's, his look at the final, in the final fight in the film, where he has his head painted, what is it? The top half of his head is painted white. The bottom half is painted black. And while it is bizarre and it certainly, leaves an impression, I can't help if, one of the big reasons why they did that and they applied that makeup to him at the end was to make the use of doubling.
Definitely.
So they could bring in this. I mean, that's the best reason I
think it even looks like, it actually looks like a black guy. When I was I paused it and I think that his double isn't even a white guy. I think it's a black guy. Maybe that's just because of the shaved head and the angle I was looking at it. It just didn't look like it was, it looked like his double looked nothing like.
They got Michael Jai White back.
Can you imagine if it was a Michael Jai White thing?
Well, Alex, you said something that, let's just get to the protagonist of the film.
Right.
Because this particular film had an $8 million budget, which compared to the $23 million budget of the first one, nearly 20 years prior, is pretty small. And so, like Regeneration, because the budget is so small, I imagine they could not afford the two leads, the two who essentially get top billing, which is really odd. Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren, they're going to be absent for a good majority of this one. And so what Hyams did, which I loved, which I thought was very wise, because in Regeneration, there really wasn't a single protagonist to follow. So with this one, John Hyams said, okay, we need a protagonist. If the big action guys are only going to be in 3 scenes, which I counted, I'd be surprised if Dolph is in this movie for more than 6 minutes. Same thing with Jean-Claude Van Damme. Day of Reckoning certainly gave us a protagonist. And what's so cool about this, okay, you're in the headspace of John Hyams, who is a compelling and tough lead who can hold their own against guys like Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren. Enter the amazing Scott Adkins. Now, I have to ask you guys are from England.
Yeah.
Is Scott Adkins a national treasure over there?
Sadly not. No, he isn't. I don't think he's any better known over here than he is anywhere else in the world, actually. The only thing I'd say is different is he probably gets a little bit more press when his films come out here because he's a very zealous advocate for any movie that he puts out. I've always thought Scott Adkins...
He's directing now, isn't he?
Oh, he does all sorts, yeah. And he's very well regarded in the industry as well. I think him and Michael Jai White are actually best friends. They've done a bunch of movies together. I've always thought Scott Adkins is what you get if you cross Ben Affleck with Jason Statham.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. Well, I mean, and in this one, I mean, he makes it excusable, the fact that, okay, if guys like Van Damme and Dolph are going to be largely absent from this movie, it makes it excusable that you're going to have Scott Adkins, a guy like Scott Adkins, take the lead in a film like this.
Yeah, you're totally right. Okay, so I'm just going to come right in and say it. There's visually, I wouldn't say that I enjoy watching everything that I see on screen in this movie. However, this is the kind of, I said it before, it's like, for me, this kind of action film says, let's take a cheesy 90s concept, early 90s concept action film, and let's say, what would it actually be like? And you see it in Regeneration really clearly. There are pregnant pauses where in a 90s film, there would have been a quip of some kind. Like when Jean-Claude just blows up the Andre character that I don't know the character's name in.
He's just the NGU.
Regeneration.
He's just called the NGU.
Yeah.
He's the NGU,
right? Yeah,
just the NGU. Yeah. That's all we need.
Yeah, he just explodes, and there's this pause where he stops, looks up at the kids that are on some kind of catwalk in this complex, in this industrial complex, and he should say something like,
"See you around."
See you around, or some quip that doesn't even anything that would be, but it doesn't happen. And I think there's lots of moments where that would have happened in 90s films to sell that kind of cartoony action style that we had become accustomed to. And a friend of mine said it when we watched Speed for our podcast. She just said, why can't we make films like this anymore? Why can't we have the cheesy 90s action film? And arguably the only franchise I think that's still trying to do it is the Fast and Furious movies. Unless I'm wrong, unless there's a lot more that I'm not paying attention to. And like it might be a lot of direct-to-video stuff or direct-to-streaming stuff.
No, but I think
Sean,
that goes.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I actually think that goes back to what Sean was saying earlier about Kindergarten Cop. Is that was the beginning of the R-rated, violent action hero starting to appeal to the family audience, and now, with the exception of the occasional John Wick, which certainly doesn't do the business that a film like Mission Impossible does, the really successful films have to be aimed at a family-appropriate audience, is what I'm trying to say. So I think the super violent action hero is kind of a relic of the past because there isn't as much money anymore. And that's why you find it in films like this. And that's why Scott Adkins is not as big as Van Damme and Lundgren were back in the 90s, because that market isn't there theatrically anymore.
Well, and something else, I mean, going back to kind of what we were talking about earlier about how this film is so completely different from the original. Something else that Hyams is doing here with this one, and again, people are really either going to love or hate. If you're a fan of the original, you're probably you're not going to like this. But something else that Hyams does here is he is making Luke Devereaux the hero from the previous Universal Soldier films. He's making him essentially the primary villain, at least so we think. And I will say, now that is a bold move to turn the known hero and the actor who always plays the hero, especially in a particular franchise, into such a menacing villain. I mean, I remember back in the 90s, when I read comic books, it wasn't even a story arc, but there was a really bold move in DC Comics. If you ever read the Green Lantern comic series, there was a thing where they brought in a new Green Lantern and they made the traditional Green Lantern, Hal Jordan. They made him the villain. And I distinctly remember this. It pissed off a lot of comic book fans, and it even started like this huge, it was before really the growth of the internet, but it started this huge campaign where fans were mailing in their disagreements with this particular move. And I mean, I guess I can go both ways on it. I will say I think it is a bold move. I think it is clever, and it's certainly keeping the franchise on its toes. But at the same time, it's kind of like, man, you want to make the hero suddenly the main villain? Like that's some moxie. That's some balls there.
I like it. I really like it because I like it probably because I think it's the reverse of what they did between Terminator and Terminator 2. I think it's a similar move, but it's in reverse. And you hesitated there, Sean, when you said Jean-Claude at least were led to believe that he's the villain, and I'm not sure he is. I think if you study the film not even too carefully, I think he says it quite explicitly at the end, and the way he acts at the end, he's still got that Unisol programming. He's going to fight if there's a fight on, you know, and he is the Luke Devereaux that we see in the cafe who just suddenly in Regeneration that gets that red mist and just beats up that guy who's coming towards them. And actually you still don't know. It's left unanswered, like who that guy was. Maybe they come in afterwards. And again, I'm sorry, I'm talking about the film from your previous episode, but he beats that guy up in the cafe with his doctor, therapist person there. And then the next scene or a few scenes later, these guys are coming in to like busting into his home and kidnapping him, to like induct him back into the Unisol program to go after, the Andre, the Pitbull character, you know, the NGU. And it's like this, he is throughout all the films, he's got this sort of reluctant thread, the Luke Devereaux character. He's trying desperately to hold on to some semblance of his humanity. And you see at the end of Regeneration, he just loses it. He just gets up and runs away and says, I'm going off. It's the sign to say I'm going off on my own. So the next time you see me, I'm going to have my own fucking army. And you know, he takes over a sort of a rogue faction of the Unisol program. And I think it's a brilliant telling of the story. Like I really enjoy the original film, Regeneration and Day of Reckoning. In terms of storytelling, I think that, and even the evolution, even the different styles and how Regeneration bridges the original and Day of Reckoning, I think, and with the ending as well, where it goes, this is me just nerding out completely, Sean. You take the idea and the concept and you push it further and further. And the ending of Regeneration, the ending of Day of Reckoning is probably one of my most satisfying endings in a franchise that I've ever come across. I was so satisfied by the ending. It all made sense to me. All these questions I had fit in. I don't know. That's the feeling I get. And I'm wondering if either of you feel the same.
Well, I think the point about making Van Damme the antagonist, the villain really, is, it's more interesting to go that route than to carry on having Andrew Scott as the psychopathic cult leader, because
he's like the beater now.
Yeah, exactly. And so his rival is now his master. And I think there's shades of that in Dolph Lundgren's performance as well. Like when he gives that speech and mentions the Day of Reckoning,
so good.
There is a little bit of, it looks like regret or something. There's some conflict in him there. And if he was playing the role that Jean-Claude is.
You mean when it goes off and you see Jean-Claude regret in Dolph's face, or when it goes off and you see Jean-Claude like he's got his head in
in Dolph Lundgren's face, because he's rallying the troops for this cult leader, and they're all throwing their fists in the air, and he doesn't look like he's actually 100% into it. I think anyway. Maybe I'm just reading into it. Maybe he was just tired that day. I don't know. But
well, I think he's spouting the rhetoric he's always wanted to spout. I mean, he's almost like a mouthpiece for a cause, And I think, I think that the Luke Devereaux character, it shows his brilliance as a leader to say, I'm not entirely sure what his mission is, what Luke Devereaux's mission is. I think he's just doing something that relates somewhat to his programming as a Unisol, and in part, and also relates to his sense of freedom and family and ending this.
Yeah, I think they were going to
weird thing is
create an army to strike back at the people who turned them into these soldiers.
But he realized at a certain point in the fight, and correct me if I'm reading this wrong, that he says there's always going to be a John. And he realized that leaving him to be free, the Scott Adkins John character, he's won. Because he's, through whatever he did to him, like it's a weird set of circumstances. They deprogram him, and then the plumber tries to kill him. The Pitbull guy. Do you know what I mean? It's like this.
Yeah.
I found it confusing, but at the same time quite thrilling, because I'm constantly guessing. Even though I'd seen it before, I'd forgotten the plot, and I was constantly guessing what's going on. Who's this FBI guy? Realizing he's actually like a handler of some kind as he's putting the pieces together. And it's so satisfying to me. And I honestly don't think that Luke Devereaux is a villain in this. He's painted as one, but I think he's the same Luke Devereaux hero that we saw in Universal Soldier. I don't think the character is different. I think that is too different. I think we've seen an evolution of the guy who he's become different, but I think we've seen a coherent evolution of the guy that we saw in the original movie because of, if you take stock of what's happened to him.
Yeah, I think we
take stock of the things that have happened to him.
Obviously, the film is told quite literally at a lot of points from Scott Adkins' point of view. Yeah. So we have to believe that Jean-Claude is the villain because his memory is that this guy killed his family.
Correct. And he even says it, doesn't he? He says, if you believe I killed your family, I did.
Exactly. So by the time you get to the end, you're probably right. He's maybe not as much of a villain. But I think that's, again, one of the interesting things that Hyams does in this film, like by giving you, he's trying to give you some of the sensory input that John has it's almost like a scene from Memento when he goes back to that house and he's remembering his wife's neck and all of that. And that's the stuff that is non-standard that I think is really interesting in this film. And I don't think it's 100% successful. I think the film is too long and too slow in a lot of places, but his references, as a filmmaker are not really action film. I think there's a bit of John Woo in the sort of artificial one-shot take at the end when Adkins is just destroying fools. Yeah. But really his references in this film are
destroying fools.
The Manchurian Candidate. There's a bit of The Shining in the middle, and certainly at the end, Apocalypse Now. And if you look at what those, I don't think those are just idle references, the
nods. They're not just little nods.
Right.
They're central. They're central.
Manchurian Candidate is about a totalitarian government takeover using war heroes as biological robots for politically motivated assassinations.
Totally.
The Shining's ghosts of the past driving the haunted to commit mindless murder. And then Apocalypse Now, you have these AWOL soldiers now serving a messianic cult leader. And the government that they once worked for is hunting them down with extreme prejudice. These are, very cine-literate references that Hyams is making. And it's strange in a way, actually, that it is actually satisfying as an action film, because I don't think he's particularly interested in making an action film. Maybe I'm wrong. I think he's interested in making like a political psychodrama, and I'd really like to see him go down that route.
I think that's why I like it. That is why I like it.
Which can we just say, this is extremely bold. I mean, I think that's the word that I'm going to keep coming back to. Yeah. But these are all bold decisions that you would not necessarily see in a Universal Soldier film. I mean, let's just say that you would not see these kind of creative touches. And you kind of talked about it already, Ben. But it is very clear that they're turning the Luke Devereaux character into a Colonel Kurtz here. I mean, because what we later find out is, I mean, you guys already kind of touched upon it, but Devereaux has started this separatist military group that's composed of Universal soldiers. What he's doing is he's pretty much taking them in and providing them with what is it? It's a serum that essentially breaks them free from their government control and allows them to think for themselves, which is ironic considering they're all following Luke Devereaux.
They're potentially all NGUs.
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
Do you have that reading?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And whereas in the original Universal Soldier film, he was just an innocent Vietnam soldier who just wanted to go home. Here, he's this. They're playing him as this higher power deity who all the zombie soldiers look to for salvation and wisdom. And what's also interesting, again, Ben, I agree with you completely. I love the fact that they are making Luke Devereaux's second in command now Andrew Scott, who was his mortal enemy from the first one. And we can assume that Luke Devereaux has also turned Andrew Scott, who, like we said, is now fighting alongside Luke and helping recruit these wayward Universal soldiers. Obviously, this is just another clone, seeing as how Luke Devereaux blew the head off the last Andrew.
How amazing. Like, I want to hear, Sean, I want to hear what you have to say about Dolph's deaths in this franchise. I mean, he just gets the most amazing deaths.
His death in this is awesome.
His deaths are
It's
amazing. And actually, before he even gets this death, I mean, again, like I said earlier, Dolph is only in 3 scenes in this film. He's in the scene in the brothel. He's in the scene where he gives this speech, and then he's in the scene, the final fight against Adkins.
Yeah.
But before we get to that fight against Adkins, what's cool is I love that speech, and I was going to play a scene.
Cool.
I was going to play that speech here in a minute.
Great.
But what's cool about that speech that he gives the soldiers, it's weirdly prophetic in a lot of ways, because it's almost kind of like this televangelical speech that never once, it's really kind of cool, because if you notice, he never once mentions Luke Devereaux by name, and he keeps referring to him as he.
Just he,
as if
him,
Luke is this. Yeah, almost as if Luke Devereaux is
his
this
name is
power.
Robert Paulson.
Again,
his name is Robert Paulson.
Again, this is bold. This is bold.
Definitely.
My brothers, let's not forget the moment of sickness. Our thoughts interrupted by unfamiliar voices. We were merely arms and legs, moving to the directive of another mind. But in an instant, the veil was lifted. And today, brothers, I stand here and declare, your minds are now your own. Each and every one of us, bred into slavery, superior to our creators. They gave us nothing inside, but the void in our soul, the curse that binds us together, brothers. But then he came along. He turned the curse into a blessing. He is the inspiration. He's the light that set us free. We are his eyes and ears, and soon we shall multiply 10, 20, 100-fold. We, pioneers, will spawn the first generation to be blessed with free will, taking vengeance upon those whose arrogance wants to soothe our servitude. With each passing day, we grow stronger, digging deeper into the outside world. Unnoticed, we live among them like ghosts, biding our time, waiting for the moment when our oppressors shall be forced to kneel before us and pay for their sins. The day of reckoning!
But I think therein lies the problem. I think who is this film really for? Obviously it's for us three, but I don't think your average Universal Soldier fan is going to come out that satisfied by this necessarily, because I do think it has pacing problems. It is too weird. It is provocative, in its filmmaking style and in the content. But I really admire that, because what Hyams is doing is he's taking the established brand, the established name recognition, and trying to evolve it and trying to take it somewhere else. And I don't know. I think it's better to swing and maybe miss a little than to just do another old retread.
I agree. I mean, the way I'm seeing this is like Batman Forever versus Dark Knight. Batman Begins. Let's say that. Yeah. That's how I see this. It's like if you were a Batman Forever fan in whenever it was 1995, it's like, and you like that kitschy stuff. You might even like the Arnie one. I can't remember what it's called now. Batman and Robin. Is that it? Yeah. And it's like you might even like that one. It's like, fine. I'm not going to get into it now. But if that is the Batman that you like, you will be disappointed by Batman Begins or the Nolan trilogy. Yeah. It's not going to do the same thing for you. But if you're a kid then and you're looking for something a bit more adult, you might actually say, yeah, you know what? I like this darker spin on it. And that's how I'm experiencing this with the Unisol franchise here. Because, again, the thing that I'm enjoying more about it isn't that just, oh yeah, I get to see another Universal Soldier movie. Like, even though I'm a fan of the first one, and I get to see one maybe with better production values and that's not as crappy as the other ones, which I had seen them all already. It's it's that the character, I think that even as much as you two are saying, I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, that it's such a departure from the original, I don't see a bad evolution of the characters. I see them as a natural progression of, you put these guys through these places and you put them in this universe. This is what's going to happen. I see Andrew Scott, the Dolph character, as finally living out his dream. Like, this is what he always wanted. This is what he became in Vietnam. And Vietnam was like an unleashing of him. And he was never allowed to fully unleash as this prophetic, speechifying maniac. And Luke Devereaux just literally set him free. And I think if there's a theme in this, not necessarily Regeneration, but in Day of Reckoning, it is saying, like, you're a slave, set your mind free. I'm not trying to go all Matrix on you guys, but do you get what I'm trying to say? That there's that, if you unleash these characters and you let them be completely free, this is what they become. There's sort of like this natural, they descend into some kind of natural order. So you get the alphas and the betas and there's some kind of evolution. And I think that that's exactly what Luke Devereaux realizes when he concedes and he realizes, oh, he's achieved his mission. He's that smart. He's that clever. These are enhanced soldiers. They also have intelligence. And for me, that he doesn't care anymore about life. He doesn't care about the life of his troops. He cares about the mission. And when he realizes that John's going to actually complete his mission for him, he concedes. He's just like, yeah, you're going to go ahead and do that. And he takes over the Unisol program, and then
it's certainly a fascinating note to end on when he just stops fighting. Like, Luke just stops fighting and he says the fight never ends. There's always another job. That's a really interesting, and the coda of him going and finding, is it Gorman, Agent Gorman or whatever? I kind of want to see the next film now. I want to, I do want there to be another one. But
that's my point.
I guess the issue with that as a franchise is that there isn't really a requirement for there to be Andrew Scott and Luke Devereaux in the story anymore. Their stories have ended. Now it's about Scott Adkins.
I don't mind. Yeah, Scott Adkins can take over, surely. How do you feel about that idea, Sean, that the torch can be passed from Dolph and Jean-Claude onto Scott Adkins as like he's now the Universal Soldier? How do you feel about that?
I loved it. I mean, and if anybody could do it, and if anybody should do it, I think it's Scott Adkins, much more so than a Matt Battaglia.
Right.
Let's be honest.
Don't.
But
poor Matt Battaglia.
I mean, and we see this. Supposedly a Creed 3 is in the works, and they're going to be doing that without Sylvester Stallone. And so, I mean, it's a delicate balance, and you kind of wonder, okay, well, should they do another movie if there really aren't any real central figures or characters from the original to continue this? I mean, I think it can be done, with the right writing. I think, I hate to keep going back to this, but while it is such a bold direction, and it is, such a creative angle to take this particular film, as I was watching it, what's really interesting is, okay, if you take a look, for example, at the Terminator franchise, okay, when I go into
franchise? Never heard of it.
Yeah. When I go into a new Terminator film, a new Terminator sequel, I know when I go into it, okay, yes, it's probably going to take place in a new locale. There's probably going to be a new villain here. I know that it is going to employ something new. However, in the end, I know that it is going to have that, it's going to have that iconic theme. And I know that somewhere in the third act, we're going to see Arnold, and he's going to be tattered, and his face is going to his face is going to have that. It's going to be half Arnold, half endoskeleton. Yeah. Same thing with a Rambo movie. I know going into a Rambo movie, granted, in the latest one, he may be battling a Mexican cartel. He may be, going to Afghanistan. But I know at the end of the day that he is going to, at some point, have his signature bow and arrow and a big knife.
I see what you're saying.
We're going to he's probably going to rip an organ out of somebody's body with his bare hands.
Exactly. Exactly. No, I know that going in. And that's, I think, my issue with this particular film is John Hyams is saying, nope.
Yeah,
I'm not going to do any
screw
of that.
you, fans. Yeah, okay. No, I concede. Of course, that's true. And yeah, I mean, we didn't even get. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, we didn't even get the eyepieces or anything like that in. Did we? Oh, we had them drilled into the skull in Regeneration, didn't we? That was horrific. I concede that point. You're absolutely right, and I know I keep going on about how I feel like this is a natural progression in terms of fans. Yeah, that's definitely what's going on. It is conscious. There's no way no one told him, like, you're going to piss off the fans. Like, yes, he knew. Like, he totally knew.
But again, he had the pull, and he's an auteur. He's an artist. He had the pull to do this. I mean, and you were saying earlier regarding Batman and Robin. Batman and Robin is charted as being where the series pretty much stalled.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, it's charted as being the film that stalled that entire franchise. And by all accounts, it is terrible. However, I will say, I will go to bat a bit for Joel Schumacher, because if you take a look at it, again, kind of going along with what I said earlier about Tim Burton, okay? He did Batman Forever, and Batman Forever turned a huge profit for Warner Brothers. And so what Warner Brothers essentially told him is they gave him that creative control, and they said, hey, Joel, do more of that. And so what Joel Schumacher did with Batman and Robin is he did more of that. He applied more of that same aesthetic, more of that same style, and he made it more his movie. And so while a lot of people like to shit on Batman and Robin, and again, I want to stress, a lot of that is deserved. However, it's kind of like, well, you liked it in Batman Forever, and Batman Forever is terrible.
It is.
But everyone liked it at the time.
Yeah.
And so I'm
guilty. I was one of them. I was one of them.
But that's bring it back to this film. Regeneration is more of the standard action film that you expect. It's very impressive for what he did on the budget, for a director to DVD or direct to video film, whatever you want to call it. Shot in Eastern Europe, all of that. But it is more like the standard direct to video action movies that you expect. This isn't. And yet, I don't think there's even a comparison in terms of quality. I think Day of Reckoning is far and above the better film, sort of objectively, just to look at it as a piece of filmmaking.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like it's Hyams squared, I guess, is what you're saying. He's been let off the leash with a decent budget. Go and do what you want. But because we haven't really talked about the action that much.
I wanted to get into that. I wanted to break down.
All right, you go for it.
Because.
Oh my god! I don't think I'm ready. I'm not ready for this.
And we haven't covered a major plot point, but through some digging, we find out that Scott Adkins' character, he finds out that he is a clone himself.
Yeah,
and he has been repeatedly cloned as part of the government's Universal Soldier program. They have created this false reality for him, including the memories of his wife and child and their death, to spur him into seeking out Luke Devereaux and then killing him, because Devereaux obviously poses a threat to their organization due to the separatist army that he is leading. What's really interesting, I don't know if you guys saw it or picked up on this, but this is pretty much the exact same plot as this year's Bloodshot.
Yes,
with
I did.
I didn't make that connection, but you're absolutely right.
Neither did I, yeah.
Same exact plot. Yeah, both released by Sony, so I don't think there were too many battles and litigation there.
Right.
But, okay, so once John finds this out about himself, he gets multiple fights. Let's break these down. The first real fight, I love this one. I think actually this fight is probably the shining achievement in the film. He is being pursued by Andrei Arlovsky's character. We get a really cool car chase that is amazingly shot, I think, considering the film's budget. And it culminates in an absolutely brutal fight that takes place inside a sporting goods store. I love this because nothing is off limits as this in this scene. Yeah. I mean, they are using all of the weapons in this sporting goods store, including, I wrote these down, weights, baseball bats, and my personal favorite, medicine balls. I love the scene of Scott Adkins punching the medicine ball, and it just exploding into dust.
Yeah.
This is, I think, out of all the scenes in the film, this is probably the best.
I look at it and no, sorry, I don't look at it. I imagine someone like Scott Adkins looking at a Jackie Chan film and saying, it's, brilliant choreography and all of that, but you'd be dead in 10 seconds if you got hit with all that stuff. And they've put that on film of like, what would be the damage to a human being if you used everything in a room?
Yeah.
And they can get away with it because they're super soldiers. But I think, I mean, first of all, you're right. The truck chase is cool and gets better as it goes on, ending with that great crash. But the fight in the store, I don't think it's...
It was reminiscent of Terminator, actually, that car chase.
No, it's not dissimilar, sure.
No.
But the fight in the store, it's not just the slickest and toughest fight in the film.
Oh my God.
I think it's genuinely possibly a career highlight for Scott Adkins, who's it's
so great.
He's a very athletic and graceful performer. But in this scene, he gets more and more powerful as the scene goes on. And he gets that baseball bat fight is really impressive. And he's almost a superhero in that scene. And then you've got there's so many money shots. Like I love the shot where the baseball bat is just lobbed at him and he just catches it. Like, it's almost like a 3D shot. He catches it pointed towards the camera.
Yeah.
And then they have the baseball bat fight. But punching I don't know if it's a kettlebell or a medicine ball or whatever, it just into dust. It's so cool. It's a great, great action scene, that.
What I also loved about that fight, I mentioned the medicine ball, but if you look at the baseball bat, the part about the baseball bat fight sequence that I love is, okay, so once they grab the baseball bats and they go at it, Adkins finally gets the upper hand because he is fully leaning into and embracing his Universal Soldier status. But what's cool about it, I don't know if you picked up on this or not, Ben, but when Magnus, the Arlovsky character, is down on the ground on his knees and he's pretty much gasping for breath, Adkins does this move with the baseball bat where he kind of gets cocky with it, where he kind of swings it and twirls it around. Did you notice that before he clocks?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I think he's almost reborn in that moment. He's realizing how powerful he is. He realizes his regenerative abilities, and it's him unleashing fully for the first time, isn't it? And that's why the scene works as well as it does. It's not just a cool fight. There's character in amongst all the action, and that's what the best action scenes do, I think. And I actually think it's almost a problem for the film because it never quite reaches that height again. The ending is cool and the one-er is cool.
Yeah.
But it's the standout scene for sure for me.
Yeah. I mean, I can't believe that you guys have left it for me to say. Like, he slices Andre's head in half like he's using a samurai sword, except he's using a baseball bat. Like, how did I get away with being the guy to say that after you guys just talking like whose mouth is not open at the end of this scene?
It's the relief.
I've got my knuckles in my mouth and I'm saying, fuck, like, what the hell? Like, that is, and it just, like, you can't do that. So it's like you say, he gets stronger and stronger and stronger. He gets stronger throughout the film. When we meet this character, he's woken up from a coma. We then learn it's like he's just been born. Like, that's what we learn. And, it's weird. He even like spits up some stuff that's like a baby spitting up milk. It's really weird at the beginning. I just realized that at the beginning. And he's leaving the hospital.
Kind of going along with Matrix.
Yes.
Let's tie it back to Keanu.
Yeah,
if you remember,
there's
in
a
Matrix,
similarity.
Once they get woken up and they see the reality, they throw up as well?
He's gonna pop. Right? He's gonna pop. He leaves the hospital with a cane, and then we see him get more and more powerful throughout the whole film. And that's, you're right, Ben. It's a bit of a peak. And the action doesn't stop from that moment on. I think it's like there's 40 minutes left of the film at that point. And it just continues. There's a bit of a pause when he realizes his fingers have grown back and stuff like that. It's just, but it is a shame. It's a failing of the film that I don't think that you see a better fight scene afterwards. Arguably the one with Dolph is pretty good. Like, it's about the same quality, I think. It's just not as fun because it's not as innovative.
Yeah, and also, you know, when he's fighting Arlovsky, they're comparable in age and strength, I would say, or different styles. Yeah. When he's fighting Dolph, you know, Dolph's 20, 30 years older than him. So it's obviously going to be different. And you see that in the fight that Dolph has with Arlovsky earlier on in the film. Let's just say, you know, we were talking about how beautiful Keanu is earlier. Dolph still looks great. He looks fantastic in this film, I think. Yeah. You're very handsome, still in great shape. And he's fighting Arlovsky with, you know, his shirt off, and you can still see how ripped he is. And it's cool. It's all about how powerful he is. He's mechanical and powerful, whereas Scott Adkins is quick and graceful and innovative. And that's the difference in their fighting styles. So when you get Arlovsky and Adkins fighting each other, you can do a lot more than you can when you get Adkins and Lundgren fighting each other later on in the film.
Well, I don't know if you guys noticed this or not, but actually I listened to the commentary that is on the Blu-ray for this. John Hyams and Dolph lend a commentary to it. And it's really kind of cool because they break down their fight scene. So in the final act of the film, when John is pretty much storming the Unisol compound that Devereaux is in charge of, after John lays waste to everyone, all these no-name Unisols, he squares off against Dolph. And what's wild about this? Okay, so they're fighting in the weapons depot of the compound, and I remember listening to the commentary, and what John Hyams wanted to do is he wanted to go from big to small in this fight. And so if you notice it, okay, when they are doing battle in this weapons, you know, storage area, they go from assault rifles to handguns to machetes and then to knives. Yeah. So they literally are going big to small. And I really liked that. And what's cool about this is because this fight scene is all done with weapons. I mean, there's really not a whole lot of hand to hand as opposed to his fight with Jean-Claude at the end. That one, with the exception of a machete, they do fight over a machete.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Is all done pretty much hand to hand. But if we look at the fight between Adkins and Dolph does finally eat it in the end after John plunges. I wrote this down because I was in disbelief at this. He plunges one of the machetes up through his jaw.
Oh my God.
And head. Another
out the top
death
of his head. It's insane.
Yeah. Another fine death for Dolph Lundgren
and he's already had a bullet to the chin at that point, hasn't he?
Yeah, through his neck. I think. Through his neck.
There's a little bit in that really does call to mind the Andrew Scott of the original movie, where Adkins shoves a knife through Dolph Lundgren's hand. Yeah, and Lundgren's response is, "That's the spirit, soldier."
Yeah,
and
that's it.
That's Dolph's best moment in the film for me. It made me smile. It reminded me of why I loved him back in the day anyway, from things like Universal Soldier. He's got a great charisma, I think, and that's what Jean-Claude's performance is missing in this film. Partly because of his character, but I think also partly because of where he was in his career. And Lundgren, I always get the feeling like loves to lay on the charm a little bit, loves to lay a bit of humor in there. Just going back to that sort of, it's an artificial one-shot take, but it is, you know, a one-shotter as Scott's going through the compound, killing everyone. That's the moment that reminded me of John Woo, specifically the hospital shootout at the end of Hard Boiled. But I think there's something interesting in there, going back to what we were talking about earlier, is he's doing a lot of gratuitous headshots in that sequence, and he's doing it in a balletic way that is at least 2, if not 3 years before John Wick got there and did that exact same thing.
Yeah. I was going to say the same point. You were talking about earlier, Sean, about Keanu, like sort of rebooting sort of action, the action genre and taking it in different directions. This did beat John Wick to this style in sort of what you might say mainstream. But it's not that it didn't exist before, the John Wick style. But you could argue this beat John Wick to it, but John Wick made it popular, if
And does it better. There's no question John Wick is, beautiful when it comes to this stuff. But I just thought it's curious that, for someone looking at it now, they go, oh, this is ripping off John Wick. When actually it's, it got there first.
So here's the thing about, here we are, reveling in brutal deaths. And, I think it's something that 90s action needed to save for like the very end. Cause it was like maybe an expensive shot. It's the money shot. It's the one that we're waiting for. Dolph's death at the end of Universal Soldier. It's epic. It's insane. It's like, that seems to be the only way you're going to kill this guy. You got this little Jean-Claude Van Damme versus this guy who's juiced up on this psychopathic, rage, and he puts him into some kind of, baler or harvester or something like that, and just shreds him to pieces. And you just think, oh, how can you ever come back from that? And then of course you get, cloning is that's the thing that saves everyone from it. But I have just through talking with you guys now, I'm having this idea that like, we lose that. That's something that we lose. It's like everyone gets killed in a sort of epic way. And we just get sort of epic death after epic death. And I'm wondering what impact that has on, the final deaths or the feel of the film. Does it soften it somehow, or do we just want more and more of it because we're bloodthirsty maniacs ourselves? What is it that's going on there?
Well, I was gonna to kind of answer that question. I was actually going to read a couple of bylines from a couple of the reviews as we close this up here momentarily. But before we get there, I mean, and we've already talked about Adkins' fight with Luke Devereaux at the end, but I'll just quickly recap it for us. So as where the Adkins-Lundgren battle was mostly with weapons, here, again, this fight is mostly hand-to-hand, with a machete being intermittently used. Jean-Claude is sporting a wild look here. We've already mentioned that. And again, another interesting narrative and artistic choice. Devereaux, he basically gives up the fight. He allows John to kill him. Really kind of cool because he sees that there's going to be no end to this never-ending cycle. And it's almost kind of cool because he looks at John as being a worthy successor. And so that is why he allows John to plunge that machete in him. I will admit it. I think the reason why the fight looks cool is because it's shot cool. But again, I don't think that Jean-Claude was really on set for much of this fight. This is pretty much Adkins fighting a stunt double.
There's a couple of things there. It's again going back to the decision to make Devereaux the antagonist in this. Jean-Claude doesn't like to lose fights on camera, and there was a lot of toing and froing with the production on this about how exactly he would lose a fight to Scott Adkins and yet still save face. So I wonder how much of the construction of that fight came out of that discussion. But at the same time, apparently he was arguing with Scott Adkins, who's, an accomplished fighter, absolutely, but predominantly a screen fighter. Arguing with him, saying, these kind of wild punches you're throwing, that's not what would happen in a fight. And I just wonder, because Scott Adkins is a very respectful and polite person, that he would never have said this. But I wonder how much he might have been thinking, you know what, Jean-Claude, not many people do the splits in the middle of a fight. So, but I don't think, that fight is anywhere near as memorable, actually, as the two fights that you see Lundgren in. And I'm not just saying that because we're on the Dolph Lundgren podcast. I think the thing that stands out about Jean-Claude in this film is the trippy, ghosty sequences and his weird look. But I couldn't really tell you any moments in that fight with Adkins other than the final moment where he surrenders and has that line.
So, and with Devereaux being, I mean, he's now out of the franchise. He's been killed. I guess they could clone him since they established that there is a cloning technique. So I guess he, is not really dead. But the film ends with John obtaining the necessary cloning equipment so that he can take over and lead the separatists group and then take on the government. And so the film really ends on a cliffhanger. Unfortunately, we have not seen a sequel, and we have not seen where it could go. But it's wild because I went online in preparation for this, and I just pulled out a couple of the bylines on this film because, again, fans, whoever is watching this film, they either really love this movie or they hate it. And so a couple of the lines, if we take a look at some of the reviews, these are some of the positive reviews, okay, that I just highlighted. They said that the film, quote, just radiates menace. They say the entire film series, especially this one, takes a lot of creative risks as it goes along. So they found that memorable. They said the entire film has a, quote unquote, mesmeric, unreal quality where things can turn on a dime, and they often do. However, if you take a look at the negative reviews for the film, they said that the film is hyper-violent, grim. They said, someone from Entertainment Weekly said that the film is so gruelingly violent that you half wonder if the director if his goal is to make the audience get up and leave the theater rather than be a party to the brutality. It's also been called mean-spirited, joyfully violent. And then someone from the New York Daily News said that the film is bound to leave you shell-shocked purely at the movie's brutal violence. So I guess I have to ask you guys, did you guys find this film enjoyable? I know we've kind of danced around this, but is the film enjoyable to you guys?
Alex, you go.
Oh, right, yeah. It's very fascinating. I'm really glad that you pulled, those reviews, because hearing you say them out loud, kind of galvanized quite nicely and my feelings about this film, but films like this. And my views have changed over the years, and I go back and forth on it. But currently I'm in a phase of where I agree with both those sets of reviews. I think that they're all correct. Everything that was said is correct. But with a slight caveat of, I don't think that that's the director's goal, is to make people leave the cinema. I think that review is being funny or glib or sarcastic. But potentially there's some truth in that with it's so obviously brutal, the violence in this. And forgive me for making the point so many times, Sean. I hope doesn't ruin, the thread of the discussion, but it feels real. It's taken a concept for me and said, this is what it would actually be like. Death and killing and soldiering, and it's not nice. It's not pretty. And it seems like the director has said that and gone, oh, you think this is fun? This is what it would be like if you had a group of soldiers who are cloned, implanted memories. They're dogs. They're even referred to as dogs at one point. And they have that kind of hierarchical pack structure. When an alpha is present, the betas they avert their gaze, and it's been, that aspect of mammalian culture has been clearly studied or looked at, or at least referenced by the writer and director of this film. And I think although it's not pleasant to watch, it's not enjoyable, in many respects. It's not, you can't say, yeah, that's fun. I really like seeing it. I think it's an accurate telling of what a universe where this kind of thing is going on, what it would be like. And arguably there's something worse for me, from a moral standpoint, of putting the kitsch, cheesy spin on this kind of warfare. And so I'm in two minds. I hope I've made it clear about whether or not this is enjoyable. I enjoy it for the commentary it's making on violence. I do think that's what it's doing. I don't enjoy watching everything that I saw on screen. But I think that it's making a point, perhaps too subtly. I think it's a good movie, because of all the things we've already said. But for my own personal enjoyment, I think I can go without seeing another movie like this for another 7 to 8 years, which is how long it's been since I've seen this. I don't think I need to see films like this very often to remind me how wrong and how brutal this kind of violence is. And I do think it was treated well. I think the story does tell us. It does tell us this story. And there is still that, 15-year-old in me who thinks, yeah, that's fucking cool when somebody's head gets knocked off with a baseball bat. So I've got these mixed feelings of just like, I can access that part of me, but then the realism of this film makes me second guess my enjoyment of the violence. So yeah, so I hope that wasn't too long-winded an answer, and I hope it does answer your question here.
Ben, I'll go to you. Do you find this movie enjoyable, and what do you think? Would you give it a recommend at the end of the day?
Yeah, enjoyable is a really difficult word. I think when it comes to the violence, I would simply say look at the films that Hyams is referencing, Apocalypse Now, The Shining, Manchurian Candidate. Do you find the violence in a Kubrick film and a Coppola film enjoyable, or does it serve a higher purpose? That's the comparison. You can't compare the violence in this to the original Universal Soldier movie, which is glamorizing, gore, fun for our entertainment. The violence in this is ugly and difficult. There are other things in the film that are also difficult to watch. I mentioned the stroboscopic sequence, obviously the torture of a family and the death of a child. So enjoyable is a really difficult word. I admire it. I think it's really interesting that John Hyams swung for the fences. I think he succeeded a lot more than he failed. And I think if you can go in with the mindset that this isn't first and foremost an action film, but it does contain some very impressive action sequences, is absolutely a recommendation. I think the sort of higher stuff, the more aspirational stuff that Hyams is going for, he's not 100% successful in. And I hope that he gets another opportunity to do something more like The Manchurian Candidate than a standard DTV action movie. But I do like the film a lot, and I think it's got some of the best sequences in the franchise. I think it's probably my second favorite in the franchise behind the original, because I still like guilt-free, gory action films.
Yeah, so okay, I have to ask you now then, okay, as a Dolph Lundgren film, where do you guys stand? Would you recommend it on that front as well?
A trickier proposition, because I think he's great in the film. But like you said, he's in it for maybe 5 minutes. So if you're sitting down to watch a Dolph Lundgren film, this ain't it. I think if you're a Dolph completist and you want to see him in a couple of good fight scenes and having some fun, definitely a recommendation. If you want to see a really good Dolph Lundgren performance, go and watch Creed 2 instead.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have to say the same thing as Ben for Dolph. But also, I don't know, Sean, if you're doing star ratings in terms of recommendations, I don't know if it matches everything I said, but I'll give this 3.5 stars. Like, it doesn't quite get to 4 stars for me, because it wasn't as much fun as I would have wanted it to be. The plot isn't sophisticated enough for me to get really into it. Although I do really like the twists it takes. It keeps you guessing. But yeah, it's not a Dolph film. It's not a JCVD film either. It's not.
It's a Scott Adkins film.
They're incidental to the film. It's a Scott Adkins film, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and Ben, I have to ask you real quickly. We touched upon it earlier, so I'm just curious on your thoughts. You mentioned Creed 2, which I think has a fantastic Dolph Lundgren performance. But I have to ask, okay, assuming they do a Creed 3, how are you going to feel if they do another, what is ostensibly a Rocky movie without Rocky? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I had some mixed feelings about it. I think I think it's time. I think, Michael B. Jordan certainly has done enough to prove he's the star of the franchise, and he is a megastar. The thing that really won me over, because I love the Rocky films and I love Stallone, do I want to see a Creed 3? Not sure if there's a story to tell, but they are giving it to Michael B. Jordan to direct, and that really excites me.
Whoa.
Yeah, so...
Whoa.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to see a Creed film without Rocky in it. I just hope they find a story. That's all.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of the heavy work is going to be in terms of the writing on that one. But with regard to this one, Universal Soldier Day of Reckoning, I'll get my recommend out of the way.
Yeah.
I do think, I look at this. This is actually my third time seeing this. I saw it when it first came out. I remember I ponied up $10.99 to rent this on demand, because it was one of those high profile on-demand releases. I watched it again when I bought the Blu-ray because being a Dolph completist, I had to own it for my collection. And then I watched it again for this viewing so many years later. I will say I think this is an interesting one to look at. It is artsy, it is surreal, it is avant-garde and unique. And these are all characteristics that you don't normally see in an action film starring Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren. Even though they are in, only maybe 10 minutes total of this entire film, these are just not things that you would see in one of their movies. So I will say, because it is attempting something new, and it is siphoning off into a new direction, I think it's notable for those reasons. Plus, it's a real showcase for Scott Adkins, who is easily, I think, one of the best and hardest working actors in the genre today. Having said all that, boy, this is a very violent and unsettling spectacle, which is weird hearing from, me, considering some of the other movies that I've reviewed on the show. But this is violence at a whole other level. And I think it's certainly going to disturb the casual viewer. And it's going to probably alienate fans of the original Universal Soldier film. Even fans of Jean-Claude Van Damme, I think, are going to be a little turned off, considering his character is in stark contrast with the original Luke Devereaux. I will say real quick on my previous episode, David Ullman, who joined me for Regeneration, he was turned off by that film because he was a fan of Jean-Claude Van Damme from the Bloodsport to Time Cop era. And if you looked at Jean-Claude Van Damme in that era, he was just a charming, charismatic guy who was constantly smiling in his films, you know what I mean? And then if you go into a film like Regeneration, where he is barely even speaking, I think he even used the term, his lids are half closed, and then you go to this film, fans of Jean-Claude Van Damme, I will say, are not going to enjoy this film. Not just because of, his lack of screen time, but just because of how dark this is. So I think if you know all of that going in, then I think there might be something of interest here. The film is maybe not enjoyable, but certainly I would say an experiment that is commendable for everyone jumping on board for and taking part in.
Well said.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, very well said. And it's certainly I think it's a boon for the action genre, to have a film like this. And I think it does lay the ground for taking violence in different directions. And I do think that, the more sophisticated commentary is there if you're looking for it. But it's an interesting point I think all three of us have made in different ways, that it's actually the older films that glorify violence, not films like this. I think films like this show the consequences.
Yeah, this is not a cartoon. That's what it's not.
No. Yeah. And it's a weird, I do find it a weird, cartoon. Yeah. I do find it a weird take that somebody would see this and say it glorifies violence. I think the opposite, it shows the consequences. And yet it is being put on screen and being shown in a way that could be argued glorifies it. Why do we need to watch this kind of thing? It's like, but in every other action film, it's sanitized. So what do you want is what would be my comment to anyone saying is like, if you can't, I don't think you can have your cake and eat it when you're talking about the rightness or wrongness of portraying this kind of violence on screen. Like, and I'm in two minds. Like sometimes I'm watching things like this saying, should I be watching this? Is this something I should actually be looking at? I don't know if I want to, and I'm at that stage in my life where I'm seriously contemplating whether I should be skipping certain things and not really watching these kinds of things anymore, because I've understood more and more as I've got older the consequences of these things. And that is a large part of what the Arniethology brand is. If you don't mind me making a reference to that, Sean.
I was going to have you guys plug your show here in a minute.
Well, so. I don't know if this is a plug for it, but it's certainly something that we noticed in Arnie's career. We talked about Dolph and Jean-Claude, how they've had to take on these roles. There aren't the action films that existed in the 90s. They're not being made. And in Arnie's career charts that very well in terms of we see Last Action Hero really being a farewell, like goodbye. Like the film itself was made and shot in a way that is actually saying these types of action films are gone, they're over, they're dead. And you can even see like Planet Hollywood, its success and failure as being evidence of this is action stardom at its peak. And, you want to buy into this and come and have this restaurant experience with all the props surrounding you. Like, here you go, come to Planet Hollywood. And then it fails. Like a few years later, they sold it, I think, really quickly. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. And it's interesting that Arnie was aligning himself not with the, if you want, the foreigner action heroes like Dolph and JCVD, although he had some affiliation with them. He actually aligned himself with the Americans. I think that's an interesting move as far as Arnie's concerned. And Arnie himself struggled to find his place again in cinema. And I'd argue that a film like Maggie is Arnie's Regeneration, if you want. It's not, I mean, it's not an action film, but just in terms of this 90s action hero superstar trying to do something that's more contemporary and seeing how he fits in a world like that. And all the reasons why you said you'd be disappointed as a Dolph fan or a JCVD fan or even a Universal Soldier fan. I think the same thing applies for, I think, any aging icon. And Keanu too. Like, it's a question that we address, when we look at, the Bill and Ted, the latest Bill and Ted installment of, do we get what Bill and Ted fans want from a Bill and Ted movie?
The answer is yes.
And I think it's something, yeah, well, okay. There you go. Don't listen to the episode.
And I remember going back through your archive and I remember listening to your review of Sabotage.
Right.
With Arnold.
Yeah, that's better than Maggie. Sorry. You got it. That's the one.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Maggie is as well, but
Sabotage
with regard to Sabotage, I mean, Sabotage is just, I mean, it is so vulgar and it is so insanely violent and just very mean-spirited, like this film as well. And so, you watch it and it's almost kind of shell-shocking in a way because you watch it and you're thinking, wow, like, this is the darkest Arnold has ever gone. And that's saying something considering in a film like Commando, he kills like 200 people.
Yeah, that's the point. That's so weird.
Is just so mean spirited and insane. But kind of like your show, like this show, I think it's a real treat going through an actor's entire CV and seeing them take these chances that they are. Before I let you guys go, is there anything else that you guys want to give a plug to or give a shout out to? What else are you working on?
I would not be able to sleep tonight if I came on to the Dolph Lundgren podcast and didn't mention my favorite Dolph Lundgren movie of all time.
Oh, please
Showdown in Little Tokyo. Yeah, absolutely. I adore that movie. Yes. It's one of my favorite 90s action movies. It's not even 80 minutes long. It's only just over an hour, I think. Amazing dialogue, wall-to-wall action. And one of the things that we haven't mentioned about the Arniethology is we took a change of direction. We did our own Day of Reckoning in a way in season 3, and we did forgotten films from the 80s. If we return to that and do the 90s, Showdown in Little Tokyo is absolutely getting watched by the Arniethology and talked about.
It's Forgotten Films is kind of like the Forgotten Arniethology season, which we've put to rest, but we will return to it. It's not over. And we're going to do a decade at a time when we return to it. If we're struggling to find an actor for our next season, I think we're going to return to Forgotten Films, in between, if that's the case. So that might be the next season. But I haven't seen Showdown in Little Tokyo. And this is one of the things I love about doing this. And I'm not sure, Sean, if you've actually seen already all of Dolph's films before you started this, but I love following actors this way.
Yes.
You have already. Yeah. One of the things I'm getting out of this.
But going back through.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going back through a retrospective lens has been a lot of fun because I'm noticing and seeing, new things.
Yeah. That's
I'm getting to see the guy try, I'm getting to see Dolph trying new things with his career.
So you've already done.
That I probably didn't pick up on the first time.
You've already done a Showdown in Little Tokyo.
It was the first episode I listened to.
Yeah. Oh, right. I've got to check it out. I've got to check it out.
Yeah, my audio was not. Yeah, that was back. My audio was not super solid.
I think I'll watch it and then check out your episode. That's what I'll do. Is that what you recommend to your fans, to watch the film and then listen to the episode? Is that because we try and get our fans to do that?
That's the first time I've been asked that. I haven't thought about that.
Right.
I guess when I do the recommendation at the end, I guess I kind of do it as, okay, if you're listening to this episode, then watch the film. I
see. Yeah.
Hopefully anyone who listens, all 10 subscribers, I imagine that they may have already seen these films already, and then they're listening to the episode, and then I imagine maybe going back through and watching it again. I don't know, but yeah, I think hopefully the show can be enjoyed on either of those fronts, either of those levels. So, and I'm really glad that the host of the Dolph Lundgren podcast and the hosts of the Keanu Reeves podcast, we can say, were able to join forces to discuss this particular film. This was
thank you, Sean. And please, we haven't plugged it. Please go and find the Arniethology. That's all you need to look for. Have a listen to an episode on a film that you like, and hopefully you'll hear us ruin it and do bad impressions over the course of an hour.
Yeah, that is what it's like. And Sean, I'm happy to say it right up front. I don't care if Ben disagrees. I'd love to have you on for Street Kings. That'll be great. And oh, great, good. Yeah, because
cool.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, definitely. Let's plan it. Well, guys, again, this has been a ton of fun. I would love to join you guys for Street Kings. So when you guys get there, count me in, and you guys are always welcome back. So if there's ever any films that you guys would like to come back for, I'd love to.
Great, thank you, man.
Okay. Well, I have to say this, Sean. From time to time we do bonus episodes that I'm sure you've noticed that have nothing to do with our current season. Like we did one on the Postman a while ago. Which
I listened to that one. That was great. Which has a scene from Universal Soldier in it. So
that's so cool. It's so cool. I love that crossover. And we've got this thing we call, at the moment we're calling it the Keanu-verse, where we find these little Easter eggs between movies that just, mess with our heads. And we used to call it the Cruisey-verse before, when we did the Tom Cruise thing. And so I don't mind like these universes melding and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think you're going to get me into Dolph movies, and I might be having to make a case for us doing a few Dolph bonus episodes, actually. So if you'd be willing to come on for them, I think you're obviously the best guest we could possibly have for any of those films. Maybe I'll persuade Ben to do a Showdown in Little Tokyo episode if you don't feel that that's taking from what you've already done.
And you know what I would do is I'd also put it on the feed here.
Yeah,
on my feed, if that's cool.
We'd like to do the same with this, surely.
Oh, cool.
No,
cool.
Is that not something we do, Ben?
Yeah, totally.
Would we not try and put this episode on?
If you're happy to share the edit with us, we'll put it on our feed for sure.
Most definitely. Cool. All right. Well, guys, this has been an absolute treat. Thank you very, very much. To everyone out there who is listening, please feel free to rate and review the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever else you go to subscribe. We always appreciate the reviews. And until the next day of reckoning, this was Sean, Ben Highton, and Alex Balerdi, and we'll see you all next time on I Must Break This Podcast.